Has anyone heard about the tall man on the REZ? He is evil. He goes by other names like Walking Sam, the tall man spirit. He's up in the Dakotas and should be left alone. Some say that he's a spirit that is attracted to negative energy. Some say that he convinces people to kill themselves. I remember first hearing about him when I lived in an old farmhouse in Minnesota. I got really depressed as a kid after that for no reason. Now I understand why. He takes young people. A friend of mine told me on the Pine Ridge REZ that she and her cousin saw the tall man one time, and that afternoon, she caught the same cousin trying to hang herself for no reason. She was in a trance and went to the basement, and there was a rope. She walked in just on time to stop her. She snapped out of it and had no idea what she was doing. To be honest, there's so many suicides at Standing Rock also. I lost 3 cousins back home. They were all young as well. Pine Ridge also has a high suicide rate. I think they put us on these lands that were, quote-unquote, haunted. Places that no one wanted to live there, so they just put us there. Anyways, I saw the tall man again, 2 days before my brother passed away. We had some thunderstorms and I saw him standing near a tree. When the lightning lit up the sky, you could see him. Unfortunately, my brother, he was part of the huge influx of suicides in the Pine Ridge back in the 2000s. Not sure if you ever heard this, but back in the mid-2010s, there were about 50 suicides in a few months. I'm not kidding. Look it up if you don't believe me. A lot of people were young, around 10 to 17. The news and media won't tell you because it doesn't bring attention or generate controversy. But we know the truth. It's mental struggles, addictions, that have worked their way up here to the REZ. However, behind all of this, we also know there's more. I do remember that my brother told me that he wanted to go visit his ex-girlfriend and her family. He was also planning on getting a job while he was there, and he told me he was all proud of his new tribal ID card. The night before he passed away, he spent the whole day at my place with us. He was happy and joking around with the kids as well. He even helped me cook dinner for the kids. The next day, which I will never forget, I found him hanging in his room in my mother's basement. I tried to cut him down for the life of me, but I couldn't. The rope was so strong, so I ended up running outside to my sister's house to have her help me. But once I stepped outside, everything hit me at once. I started screaming his name and started crying so loud, which I hadn't realized it at this point, but I had made it to the street where I fell on my knees. My chest started to hurt and I couldn't catch my breath. My mother's neighbor must have heard me because she came over to ask me what was wrong. I told her I just found my brother hanging. I guess that statement didn't click with her because she ended up asking if he was okay. Or now that I think about it, maybe it wasn't even shocking no more, because there were a lot of suicides going on just about every single day. I told her no, that he's gone. She did help me call for help on her phone. I then told her I had to get to my sister's that lived a few houses down. She gave me a hug and I went on my way. I was knocking but no one was answering, so I started screaming her name, banging on her bedroom window, and then she finally came out. She had just woken up. I remember telling her that she had to help me. Meanwhile, she was asking what was going on. Do keep in mind that I was in a state of panic, so her husband also came out asking what happened. I told him that I needed help getting my brother down because he had hanged himself, and that I couldn't wait anymore, so I ran back over to my mother's place, where at this point, I found my mother screaming inside the house. The crazy part is that she didn't know anything. She had just woke up and walked over from my own place, where she would stay the night with me to help me with my children. But she said that she knew something was wrong. She said she could feel it, so she was gonna go over to check on him, and that's when she saw him. I remember his body was so cold, stiff like a rock. I couldn't believe it. My own sibling, which I had helped my single mother raise as well. He never showed no signs of anything. He was friendly, a happy person that loved life to the fullest. He never lost his faith. He believed in God. He believed in forgiving others and helping others that needed him. He loved his family, his nephews and nieces. He helped me a lot with my own kids that I will never forget. My oldest had taken it the worst because he didn't have his own dad in his life, but my brother was there for him as a father figure. But still, I couldn't understand why he ended his life so soon, at the age of 22. I remember at the night of his wake service, we had a few people show up telling us that my brother's death wasn't suicide, that he may have been murdered by his own best friend and his girlfriend, but they didn't want to tell the police anything, which I still didn't understand why they waited so long to even mention something like this to us. Pretty strange. He did have a girlfriend, but nothing too serious from what I remember. He also knew she wasn't really into him. She was too busy chasing other dudes around. But to this day, here's the crazy thing. My brother did have a lot of bruising to his right temple and his ear. It turned dark, showing up like he was hit by something. Nothing was ever investigated. However, after a few days, my mother's house became haunted. Weird things started happening there. After my brother passed, my mother stayed with me as she wasn't ready to move back in. Sometimes we would go over, and a lot of noises in the house could be heard. Unexplained, like glass being broken, but yet we would find nothing on the floor, and slamming doors, knocking on the windows. Sounds like somebody throwing something heavy against the walls, especially on the basement. Sometimes we could hear somebody running up and down the basement steps, or trying to open bedroom doors at night. Sometimes we would even hear what sounded like a few people whispering in the basement, talking to each other, and we would also find things in the house go missing. And then sometimes they would turn up later in a few weeks right in front of us. We would also find that some of the rosaries that my mom had around the house would be flipped face down, or this one time we found the rosary that the arms of the cross were both broken off. We did have the house blessed twice, and nothing was changing. We did get rid of his belongings after the funeral. Well, after some time, my mom moved back in. Sometimes my kids will go spend time at her place, and they have said that they seen my brother a few times, and he looked sad, and a few times he looked very upset. After those things happened, my mom decided just to move in with me instead. I did have my place blessed a few times and had a spiritual person come by. He ended up smudging and prayed for every one of us. I will never know what exactly happened to him the night that he passed away, or even why he did it. But I know I can't spend my life wondering what happened. I have learned to accept the fact that he's gone now. But now I have to remind myself that I have children that need me more than anything. Life goes on no matter if we like it or not. This is my story that I'm sharing with you. Sorry if it's not really a scary story, but it is a true story, my own experience, and if anything, thanks for listening. Driving at night on the REZ, you'll hear stories about something chasing you. I have a story from my mom. It doesn't involve the bad medicine people known as Skinwalkers, because we don't have that up here on Pine Ridge, but we do have something else. My mom told me the story one afternoon while we were driving to a border town called Hot Springs. One of her high school classmates, I will call her Yvette, had made the journey the week before. My mom was talking about her high school days when she got sort of quiet for a bit. She was looking out the window. Then she said, "This road is fine in the day, but I really don't like it at night." I did ask her how come, and she told me this while we were driving down the road. She was a boarder at the Pine Ridge School during the late 60s. She would get on the bus in Kyle on Sunday afternoon, and it would take her to school where she would stay all week and then ride it back on Friday afternoon. Like I said, this was the late 1960s, so boarding schools were a bit different than before, and she said they weren't fully forced to go, but because there wasn't any local schools around, she was sent because the government deemed it the only way towards a path to education. Anyways, she made friends at school, and she would ask my grandparents if she could spend the weekend with Yvette. They knew who Yvette's parents were, so they were fine with her spending the weekend here and there. Kyle wasn't as big as it is now, so she would take every chance to spend it with her friends. Yvette's family lived in Oglala, which was about 20 miles north of Pine Ridge. As my mom explained it, that weekend, Yvette and her decided to catch a ride with another classmate to a dance. It was going to happen in Hot Springs that Saturday night. Their friend, I will call him Dominic, picked them up around 7, so they could get there in time for the dance at 8. Back then, she said they used to have dances in Hot Springs every other weekend. They got there and were having a good time, but sometime throughout the dance, they lost track of Dominic. My mom and Yvette looked all over for him, and one of their friends named Eve told them that she thought she saw him leave. They got worried about how they were going to go back home to Oglala. Again, this was back then. It's pretty funny how I have to mention that there's no cell phones around, or anything. If you weren't around this time, you missed out. While they were looking for a house phone to call Yvette's parents for a ride, their friend Eve said that she could give them a ride back home to Oglala after the dance was done. Everybody got ready to go back home, since there was nothing else to do basically. On their way back from Hot Springs, Yvette said that she noticed a light in the sky coming towards them. She said it was a plane and soon lost interest in the light as it seemed to just be hanging in the sky. They were about 2 miles out when there was a bright flash in the sky behind them. Yvette looked behind them again and she saw that light again, but it seemed to be closer now. This happened while they were making the turn into Oglala from Highway 79 onto Highway 18, and also Eve noticed that the light seemed to be lower to the ground, and it started following them down the road. As it got closer to them, the light went closer to the ground, and suddenly, their car engine just stopped. My mom and her 2 friends were getting scared, wondering what was going on. All 3 of them started yelling and screaming, more like panicking. Eve was trying to start the car, but it wouldn't start up. They tried and tried, so after like half an hour they left the car behind and started walking back. This way, if one of their friends drove towards the same road, they would see them much faster than having to sit there. They all had assumed that some of their friends would more than likely come across them. My mom then said, I can't remember how long we were walking down the road, maybe around 15 to 20 minutes or so, and not one single vehicle had passed by. But then Yvette saw a farmhouse with a bunch of lights ahead. She said that there was a house that was off to the north of the road in the distance with the lights on. Yvette said that it was most likely a farmer or a rancher, so they chose to see if they would help them get the car started. They were kinda iffy about asking for help, but honestly, back then, at least in these times, everyone around the REZ stood together, so they chose to try their luck even though it was 3 young women asking for help in the middle of the night, and that itself seemed a bit strange. I mean, what could go wrong, right? The lights were on and they could hear people talking and there was music playing. My mom said as soon as they knocked on the door, the lights went off. The people quit talking and even the music stopped. They stood there knocking and knocking for some time. Pretty soon, they got mad and started yelling at the people in the house to please open up because they needed help. They said their car had broke down and that if they won't help them, if they could at least use the phone to call someone who would come help them. There was no response, and no one came to the door. Yvette knocked one last time and they got off the porch and started walking back to the road. As they started walking back, as soon as they got like 100 yards away, the lights and the music came back. So they turned around, started walking back to the house, but as soon as they knocked, the same thing happened when they knocked on the door the first time. The voices stopped. The lights and music went off. She said they tried like 4 times to get them to open up, but everything would go quiet as soon as they knocked on the door. Then, as soon as they left, the light and the music would come back on again. You could hear voices, laughing, when they would get close to the door, so they gave up and went walking back to the car. When they got there, Eve continued trying to start the car, but it still wouldn't. By then it was 2 a.m., so they chose to sleep in the car, because there was no way they were going to walk hours back home, so they just locked the doors and went to sleep. It was just after sunrise when someone was knocking on the window. It was a guy that Eve knew. His name was Francis. He stopped to ask what happened. They told him and he helped them get the car going again. Well, not really helped, because when Eve tried to turn it on again, it actually did start up. Once the car started, my mom mentioned that Yvette was still mad about what happened, so she told Eve to drive up to the house. Yvette wanted to know why those people wouldn't help them, so when they got to the house, they all got out of the car and walked towards the front door. They could see that the house was abandoned. All of the windows were gone, the doors as well. Then, they noticed that there were no power lines to the house. My mom then mentioned that Yvette decided to look through a window, and her face went pale. She said that Yvette started walking away, and so they all just took off running back to the car and went back to Oglala as fast as they could. At this point in the story, my mom then looks at me as I'm driving, and then she says, "And that's why I really don't like this road at night." She told me that she doesn't know what all this was about, but based off of other stories I read, I can't help but think that maybe, what if this light was something else? Maybe it was a spirit, maybe it was protecting them, and why did the vehicle stop? And what about the house? I know my mom wouldn't lie about this. Maybe a spirit was trying to protect them from that house by cutting their engine off, because maybe there was witchcraft going on in that house. I don't know, a lot of what ifs. But what do you all think? In 2016, my boyfriend, who's now my husband, we went camping in eastern Pennsylvania. The place we decided to stop for the night was primitive. Camping was free, no cell service. There was barely a road. We did encounter 2 other people. They might not factor into what happened later at all, but they were creepy, so I'll describe them. The first was a woman who had her truck off to the side of the road. She had the hood open and seemed to be waiting for someone to stop and offer to help. My boyfriend had no problem helping someone, but he said this time something about her put him off. She didn't really seem like she needed help, and sometimes people who need help look at you hopefully as you approach. She looked like she just expected we would stop. That's what my boyfriend said anyway. I hadn't really noticed anything that strange about her. The next person came when we had chosen a spot and were setting up a fire for hot dogs. I had noticed people drive by a few times, but my boyfriend pointed out that every time was the same car, and the man in the car was just looking at us each time he passed. My boyfriend was a little uneasy about this, but we had driven around for a while before finding a place that we liked. It was raining and everything was muddy, and we wanted the driest sight possible. Maybe that guy could have been doing the same thing. We then thought about moving, but the road was muddy too. If he wanted to find us, all he had to do was follow the tracks. There were some other tracks, but not many. He would only have to backtrack a little to locate us again. He didn't come by again, so we ended up staying and spent the last few hours before dark just goofing off. No one else drove by. Whether or not those 2 had anything else to do with our experience, the real fear came later. We had gone to sleep in our tent, and sometime around 3 in the morning, we were awoken by this very loud noise. I can't describe it very well, or even remember exactly what it sounded like, but my boyfriend said it reminded him of a chain gun revving up. It was also similar to how it would sound if someone recorded a shovel being dragged over gravel, and they played it over a loudspeaker. He jumped up and looked out the little window, but he couldn't really see anything. The sound repeated again. I was too scared to speak, so my boyfriend whispered that it was most likely miles off, and that I should go back to sleep. I didn't question this, as I figured loud sounds could be easily heard miles off. After we left, he told me that it sounded like it had actually been coming from just down the road, but he didn't want to freak me out. Looking back, I should have wondered why he would whisper if apparently the sound was far off. I was still terrified. Every little thing I heard outside sounded like someone was walking around the tent. We lay there for a while longer, when finally, my boyfriend told me to get dressed because we were leaving. I got alarmed by this, and even more when he started unwrapping the machete from its plastic. It's the one that we had just bought for this trip. We quickly packed up and loaded the car. I looked around for footprints that weren't our own, but despite the moon providing plenty of light, I couldn't really see. I did point out something that my boyfriend hadn't noticed before we got into the car. There was a beer can by our dead fire. It wasn't there before, and we didn't even bring beer. While we were driving away, my boyfriend explained that he was nervous, that someone might have been trying to make us come out, so he didn't think it was a good idea to run from the tent right away. He was also expecting to find out that our gas tank had been siphoned out, but that wouldn't have stopped us because we had a hybrid car. We ended up joking that it would be a funny hybrid commercial. Number of kidnappings avoided by driving a hybrid. The rest of our trip, we only ended up staying in well-populated campsites, or we simply got a hotel. Stay safe out there. None of the names that I'm going to use here are real, but the people definitely are. When I was working on my master's, I landed a job working part-time in a paper. It was a small outlet, and I mainly applied because I enjoyed writing, and it was a pretty easy part-time job, not because I was serious about becoming any journalist. However, the boss man went ahead and saddled me with a quote big feature article covering the poorest neighborhood in the city. I didn't know how to feel about this, but my boss told me that my writing style would suit the subject matter, so I'm scheduled to meet up with this guy named Reverend Downing. His job is to explain to me the neighborhood's history, as well as introduce me to a few interesting locals. So one morning, I met up with him in his office in the neighborhood church. He actually turns out to be pretty funny. He tells me all about the neighborhood, mixing in bits of history with funny jokes. All of this happens to be great stuff for me and my article. As he starts walking, I'm taking notes when I hear a crowd gathering inside. He tells me that it's the weekly food pantry setting up inside the church. He also says that the needle ladies are showing up. I ask, who are they? He said it's a group of women who set up needle exchange on the church grounds. Drug addicts show up, tell them how many needles they use daily, and then women give them fresh needles for a week, and they take their used ones. The Reverend then says that he's going to go check up on things. In the meantime, I get up to stretch my legs. I step out of the office where a crowd of women and children are. They're all picking out some canned items that are spread out over a few different tables. Through the doorway on the far side, I can see where the Reverend is talking to the needle ladies as they're setting up the tables. I'm watching the dead-eyed druggies waiting in line when I feel a tug on my shirt. I turn around. There's a little boy looking up at me, a giant smile on his face. Hey, they have a nothing man buried outside, he says. At first I thought he said a muffin man. Excuse me, I ask. A nothing man, he repeats. I can see everything from my window. They made it inside. Then they took him outside and buried him. He points behind me and says, right there. I turn around to see Reverend Downey walking back inside. He then says in his big warm voice, come on out, I want you to meet someone very special. I turn around to say goodbye to the little kid, but he's gone. I'm introduced to Grandma Kane, who is raising 4 grandchildren all by herself. Reverend Downing gets a look on his face and tells me that the children all have AIDS. Grandma Kane and the 4 children live in a small apartment. It's in a building just down the street. I end up walking back there with them to do a small interview with her. I'm not lying when I say that the apartment building that they lived in was a shithole. It was. The elevators didn't work. Parts of the ceiling are missing. There's holes in the walls, exposing all the wiring beneath. There was no air conditioner, and it's the height of summer, so we're boiling as I'm interviewing Grandma Kane, next to an open window that is. They don't all have AIDS, she says of the children. Just 3 of them. 1 doesn't. Apparently their mom was a heroin junkie who spent most of her life in and out of jail. She basically prostituted herself out for drug money non-stop. The mom eventually went away to prison for good, and the kids ended up going with Grandma. What about the 4th child, the one that doesn't have AIDS? That's the oldest, Grandma King tells me. She claims that Martha was not born with AIDS and that she has been tested, which is extremely rare. She also claims that Martha was raped when she was 9 years old, but that event traumatized her. Overnight, it was like a switch flipped in the girl's head. Martha started spending all her time running around the neighborhood with drug dealers and criminals. She's only 13, and she has had 2 abortions already. I asked Grandma Kane what happened to the person who raped Martha, but she refuses to tell me. I'm kind of surprised because she's been so forthcoming up until this point. I assume that she's afraid of someone. Was it one of the drug dealers? I ask. No, she says. So was it somebody around in the neighborhood? No, it wasn't one of them. She seems to be getting more and more nervous as I ask her about it. Then she says something that leaves me confused. Everyone knows about the criminals and the drug dealers, but nobody knows the truth about the ghetto. So what is the truth? I asked her. She seems exasperated now and finally says, there's worse things out there than drug dealers. Things? What things? She looks me dead in the eye and makes a motion like she's sipping her lips closed. My curiosity has overtaken me by this point, so I tell her that we can do things off the record, which is something that I always wanted to say during the interview. If she wants to, then we can do it. So I turn it off. She's fidgeting now, staring out the window. Before she seemed nervous, but now she's scared. I then say, "Is somebody telling you to stay quiet? I can help you." She shakes her head. I ask, "Who are you afraid of?" And then she snaps. It's not a who. Instantly, her body relaxes, and her eyes seem to glaze over. She turns and looks out the window. At first I assume that she's ignoring me, but then I notice that she's not breathing. Her chest isn't moving. I'll cut to the chase and say that she basically died right there. The grandkids were screaming and crying. I call 911. Nobody shows up for an hour, and I call again. The dispatcher says that the police will be right over, and they are. 2 squad cars though, no ambulance, and then it hits me. No one's even coming to remove Grandma Kane's body. After talking with the cops where I explained what happened and that I was interviewing her and then she passed away, they tell me to leave the premises immediately, and they assure me that somebody will deal with the body. Then they put the kids in the back of the car. I ask, where are the kids going to be taken to? One of the officers says, most likely the prison. They have a child care facility there. And he wasn't joking. By this point it's almost dark and I need to get home. I make the walk back to my car, and I'm passing the church courtyard when I hear a familiar voice. Do you want to see where they put it? I turn around and it's the same kid from earlier. That big goofy smile on his face and all. After all that I just went through, his silly grin kinda catches me off guard, and I find myself chuckling a bit. They put something on top of the nothing man's grave, he tells me. You can still see it poking out though. He points towards the churchyard. Don't ask me why, but I walk over and begin to inspect the yard. I know that the kid is most likely just telling stories, but I guess I'm still on autopilot, still processing the events of that afternoon. Then, I find a round patch of dirt that looks like it's been recently dug up, and in the center is something that kind of sparkles in the low moonlight. I reach for it, then I pull my hand back, squeezed into a little grove in the dirt, right in the center of the freshly dug dirt. It's a human eye, staring straight up at me. I almost gag and I step back. Then I hear a familiar voice. Did you find something? It's Reverend Downing. He leans in the doorway of the church, almost completely hidden by the shadows. For a moment I'm confused. Then I point down on my feet. Have you seen this? He doesn't respond. He just says, I kept an eye out on your car for you. Before I can respond, you gotta keep an eye on things around here, he said, or they disappear. At this point he's not even smiling, and even his voice starts to sound different. Things always go missing around here, he tells me. Cars. people, and the police isn't even gonna bother to investigate. I get myself collected and I ask, is there somebody here? Reverend Downing steps out of the shadows and says, I did hear about Grandma Kane. There's this weird expression on his face. It finally dawns on me that he's basically saying all this as a threat. If I wasn't a reverend, I bet you'll never find what killed her. He said this and then paused for a second, and I'm sure I would win that bet. Who the hell is here? I ask. It's not a who, it's a what, he says, and then begin to feel severely nauseous and dizzy, and you're gonna find out just what that is if you don't step back. He reaches for my hand, grabs it, and yanks me back from the ring of recently dug dirt, and just like that I feel better. I then notice that the Reverend is sweating. His hand is on his chest, his finger searching for his crucifix. He tells me to get on home now, and as I walk away, I hear a strange sound, a weird humming sound that seems to be coming from beneath the ground. I didn't even think twice. I scramble to my vehicle. I start the engine and leave, away from the church and out of this neighborhood. As I'm driving, I pass by Grandma Kane's apartment building. I glance up at her small window, and I can still see her body sitting up in the chair. I'm not sure if it was just my imagination, or the shadows, or the fear, but it also looked like she was missing an eye. Needless to say, these events shook me to my core. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do about the article. In the end, I ended up taking the easy way and wrote a feature piece like I was told to, focusing on the emotional struggles of living in a ghetto, ignoring all the true disturbing things that I had seen. I spoke to a leader and some recovering addicts to build my piece, but I steered clear of the church and the Reverend. I couldn't help but bring up something to the person that I was interviewing. He was running for something in that town. Can't exactly remember what. He was very knowledgeable of the neighborhood, and I also ended up asking him if he ever heard of something called the Nothing Man. His reaction left me wondering. There was a flash of recognition in his eyes, but he insisted, I only know it by that name. He said it was an old urban folk tale. It was known in the neighborhood before he was even born, and that it was now basically forgotten. It's one of those things you heard kids talking about during the Depression, a scary story to scare each other. I know something's going on there. And beyond that, I have no fucking idea who or what the Nothing Man is. So before I begin the story, I want to give you some context that will help you understand where I'm coming from. So why does a Skinwalker curse you? Sometimes a person or a family will pay a Skinwalker to curse someone they hate. Even family members will curse their own family. There are different ways they can actually curse somebody. The common way is to visit the person's house and leave a cursed item on the property. The actual shape-shifting is to invoke fear in people. Nowadays, most of them are just hired. Acquiring wealth is one of their main priorities. We know Skinwalkers are normal people like you and I. However, they do practice witchcraft when they aren't in skin. Or, they practice what Americans call witchcraft, or bad medicine you can say. Can they just hop in a car and drive to Florida or New York or something? Well, of course they can. But will they? Most likely not. You see, Skinwalkers are the opposite of what our traditions and culture teach us. They are medicine men who were simply overcome with greed and hatred, or power. When they aren't causing evil, they simply are practicing bad medicine, grave robbing, spreading fear, and causing sickness. This is why if you live in the city or outside of the nation, the chances of you encountering a Skinwalker are basically zero. It would be hard to find work in an area with no Navajo people, which is why I doubt they would move off the reservation or to an area with few Navajo people. Skinwalkers stick around the REZ for the most part. After all, they are native people using black magic. I would even go on and say that there aren't that many alive today. They're not spirits. They can actually be killed. But what about your cat or dog or chihuahua being a skinwalker? Well, they can, but the actual pet would have to be dead first. They can't copy a living animal. They need the actual skin. Like I said, skinwalkers mainly target people they were hired to, which again, if you live in the city, you have nothing to worry about. Now, can a curse follow you even years after you have moved? Well, of course, which is why I want to share this story with everyone, to show you that they only target people they were hired to. The first thing I want to say is that I am Navajo. I do have a lot of stories about encounters with Yinagloshis, which you might know them as skinwalkers. However, the word skinwalker is basically Americanized. So there was a woman that was infatuated with my grandpa. She requested that my grandpa build her a home. However, the woman thought that as my grandpa worked on her home, she could get him to fall in love with her in the process. The deal was done, and my grandpa built the woman a house. My grandpa collected his payment, but instead of getting with the woman, he ended up marrying somebody else, which was my grandma. The woman became enraged with jealousy and ran the newly married couple out of the community. The couple relocated and started a new life. They had 6 children, 2 of them being twin girls, 1 of them being my mom. In the Navajo tradition, twins are seen as very powerful. My grandpa began construction on a new home. While they were building the house, all the children, including my mom, would play outside as the adults worked. As they were playing, my aunt noticed an animal emerge from the woods. It was a coyote. Most of the time, coyotes are very skittish and avoid humans at any cost. However, this coyote made its way closer to my mom. A strange smell filled the air, like something dead. The coyote then came right up to her. She said it didn't bite her, but instead knocked her down, put its mouth over her mouth, and began to suck the air from her. It was at this point that she actually passed out. One of the grown-ups that was working on the house saw what was going on, and everyone ran towards the coyote and my mom. All the grown-ups were yelling and shouting as they ran towards them. The coyote darted back into the woods, and my mom fell to the ground. She was blue. The family worked fast and were able to wake her back up. This incident, of course, caused my family to go see a medicine man. He revealed to them that it was the woman still harboring jealous feelings towards my family, even after all these years. So the medicine man had a prayer done, and it was thought to be the end of it. Later, the family received the news that the woman, eventually, passed away. As more time passed, construction on the home continued and all my aunts and uncles continued to grow. They had built the first story of their home and moved in. My mom shared the bedroom with her twin sister, and they slept together on the king-size bed. It was a hot summer night and the family kept all of the windows open. One night, my mom left the room to use the bathroom. The family kept a small light in the hallway. She got out of bed, walked down the hallway, and did her business. She returned to bed, and as she was covering herself, she happened to look up. She froze. At the open window was a coyote. Its eyes were shining from the hallway light. The window was pretty high, and so the coyote had to have been standing on its hind legs. My mom was frozen with fear, and she made eye contact with it. It was then that she noticed that same smell, the smell of death. She snapped and ran out of the room screaming and crying. She ran to her parents' room and got my grandpa. He ran into the bedroom, half expecting it to be a figment of her imagination. But the strong smell hit him as well, and there was the coyote still standing at the window. My grandpa yelled and ran to get his rifle. He then ran out of his home, but the coyote was gone. My grandparents tried to comfort my mom, but she cried until morning. And again, my family seeked out the medicine man. The medicine man came around the house and they spent a few hours outside. I was told they ended up digging holes outside and recovered what they call a bundle. The medicine man said that inside the bag was hair, nails, and small pieces of what looked to be decomposing flesh. He explained to my family that the hatred that this woman had for them was so strong that the evil intentions that she had for my family continue even after the woman passed away. When my grandparents were blessed with the twins, the woman knew of the strength that it would bring to the family, and so she actually wanted to get rid of my mom, and so she ended up contacting a skinwalker. My mom says that the coyote that she saw at the window is the same one that attempted to suffocate her. Even the smell of death was familiar the second time that she encountered the skinwalker. She hasn't seen it since that night, and nobody, including my mom, has had any more experiences like this. This is also why we as Navajos burn clothing and personal items of family who has moved on. We don't keep anything belonging to the dead. Keeping these items can actually make you sick or suffer things in your life. As I said in the beginning, skinwalkers do the opposite. They use bones and hair from the dead and victims to create these bundles to place near a person's home and have a curse fall on the person. We still go by our traditions, and a lot of stuff is kept within our tribes and cultures. I would also like to note that I personally share my experiences with family members only. One of the main reasons is because we have more respect for all of our ancestors and the dead, and it's considered part of our culture spiritually, not as something to talk about and scare each other for fun. We have a reverence for the dead, as where modern Americans hold one ceremony and leave them for memory. Most of us don't even like talking about these kind of stories or ghost stories in general, because it's actually dishonoring to the dead. We normally talk about our ancestors and how they lived, and if we happen to see them again as a ghost, then we honor them. I have seen my fair share of spirits, and it's just another part of being human. Dying is not fear, no heaven, no hell, just a lesson learned to go into the next life. There's also no such thing as a friendly ghost. In our culture, a ghost will never have your best interest at heart. The chende, or quote-unquote ghost, that people talk about is more feared than a skinwalker. Like I mentioned, there is no such thing as a good ghost. They're all bad. The reason why is because when a person passes, all that was good in them rises up and scatters to become part of the Great Spirit, or just simply everything. However, what was bad and dark about the person is the only thing that remains, as it's too heavy to leave. The beliefs about Chinde being bad and something to fear is one of our strongest beliefs. If a person dies in a hogan or in another dwelling place, it becomes a house belonging to the dead. Traditionally, nobody would ever live there again. If it was a store, people might actually close the store after somebody died. We also don't cry too much at the funeral of a loved one, or actually grieve for too long for fear of that Chinde coming. We also don't touch objects that belong to them for fear of attracting the dead's Chinde. Maybe in another story, I'll go more into detail about Chindes. Now, before I end this story, as much as I said that you don't gotta worry about skinwalkers, and even after learning and knowing, and if you're still pretty convinced you came across one, even though I'm pretty sure you would know, and you wouldn't be posting or asking, did I come across a skinwalker? Trust me, you would know. In all seriousness, get a medicine man to bless your house. If you're concerned about protection, they should give you arrowheads or something. I won't go too much into detail about the ceremonies. I also think you can buy some arrowheads blessed directly by a medicine man for protection. I don't recommend you doing any ceremonies by yourself or any incantations, no matter what videos or things you heard or actually read online. There's a reason why the elders are the only ones who do this. I would suggest hiring a medicine man from a nearby tribe to help you. If a skinwalker has cursed you, the last thing you want to do is for this curse to spread even more into your life. My grandfather, a wonderful medicine man, He would always warn me about people who go back on their medicine. For example, they would say prayers in reverse, and even singing the songs backwards. We would be eating dinner and he would just stop and shake his head before going back to eating and say, "He used to be a good man." I think his medicine was strong enough that he would be able to hear neighboring medicine men, and he would scare me by saying stuff that I had forgot about. For example, drinking, smoking, some nights with women, and some other stuff like that. He would just ask and it felt like he already knew. But one thing that I'll never forget, and he completely chewed me out for this, was when I was walking counterclockwise in his Hogan. He barked at me and told me that I might just lend some help to a person who was actually needing it. So to this day, even in my own apartment, but when I'm walking around, I'll walk around clockwise. See, there's something about opposite and reverse. Those reverse people actually become witches, or sometimes even worse. I'm not going to go too much into detail about this, but I just want to let you all know that there is power everywhere. It's easy to make the wrong move if you're not informed. The other reason I'm saying this is because I know a lot of people like ghost stories, and some of you claim that you want to see a ghost. But let me tell you, it's not fun. And until you live with the problem of energy or spirit that causes issues, you're going to rethink what you wish for. Back in 2016, I was turning 23, and I chose to take a trip from Central Texas to Colorado Springs where my uncle is at. This was for my birthday, which is on October 31st. My friend Sam and I set out for Colorado on the 25th and got there on the 26th. We spent the first 4 days doing normal stuff, going through the shops in Denver, the Garden of the Gods, and also drove up to Pikes Peak. So the night before Halloween arrives, we were sitting in my uncle's backyard around a fire pit, smoking of course. I mentioned that I haven't gone camping in quite some time, and my friend jumps at the opportunity. He quickly starts planning a camp out for the next night. Halloween arrives and we start packing for our camping trip. We throw in some blankets, a tent, some cooking supplies, and some flashlights. I also borrow some bear mace from my uncle, and we headed out towards White River National Forest. Specifically, this was on Henry Mountain. I think even just typing out the name again gave me chills. So we finally get up the mountain around 11 a.m. The campsite is set up by 12 o'clock with a rock fire pit in the middle, surrounded by 2 logs. And my tent is facing away from the mountain in the forest. So let me tell you what happened. And I don't exactly remember what time it was, but we had been sitting, smoking some weed, and talking since the sun went down. It then starts to get too cold for me, and we go inside the tents to warm up and call it a night. I wake up sometime later in the dark, and to be honest, I'm freezing. I realize that we packed like idiots and we're not ready for a night on top of a mountain. I wake Sam up and say we should go to the Forerunner and sleep back there. He agrees in less than a second. I guess he was also cold. So I unzip the tents and I take a knee to tie my boots, while my friend starts gathering up the blankets and pillows. I look at the fire pit that we had made, but it looks like someone had messed with it. Like somebody had done something with the ashes, and half the rocks from the pit were gone, with no trace of where they went. I shrugged off that I fell asleep first, so I figured that Sam maybe did it for some reason when I was sleeping. So we jog over to the Forerunner from the cold, and I throw the blankets and pillows in, and we jump in. So an hour later or so, my friend is snoring away, and I happen to be wide awake. I can't get the fire pit out of my head. It just gave me a creepy feeling, almost eerie-like. He wouldn't mess with the fire pit that we spent all afternoon making. I eventually give up and I decided to start smoking. So I moved to the driver's seat by just crawling from the back. I take a look around. It was like my windshield had become a portal to the darkness. I put a headphone in my right ear and I grab my pipe and I start loading it. That's when I hear something. I pause the music and I lean towards the window, using my arm against the door to steady myself. I was listening for anything out of the norm, and my friend's snoring wasn't helping. So I kind of push him and he kind of wakes up. I heard him ask if I was smoking or not. I gave him the pipe and I told him to shut up and listen. Suddenly, we heard something clicking. Both of us heard it. I could see the reaction on his face. I turned back to look and I put my arm against the door. That's when I felt it in my arm. A slight vibration in the door every time I heard a click. Then it hit me. Someone, or something, was trying to open the door. Immediately, a million thoughts ran through my head. And the second one was, fuck all this. It happened again 2 more times. It was just switching doors when I'm watching in the span of 5 seconds. Right after the second pull, I heard the door behind me trying to open. Then the back right, then the hatch, and finally, the passenger side door. I was shocked and speechless like never before. I had seen nothing like this and it was happening so fast. I remember this cold feeling in the pit of my stomach as I looked at the passenger window. Now, all of my windows have limo tint, which is why I couldn't see outside, and I also know anybody outside couldn't see in. But as I was looking over at the window, I heard 3 small taps. That's enough, I say out loud. I turned to my friend and I told him to hand me the keys. As I did, they realized that we were in the car and not in the tent. I say this because as I flick on the high beams, I felt everything inside of me die. There was 20 plus people in the forest. One of them seemed to be pouring something on our tents, and a few others were pulling up the tent spikes. For a second, they were frozen like deer in the headlights, and I wonder how long they've been watching us for. I throw the car into reverse and go down the mountain so fucking fast that somewhere along the way, I ended up breaking the exhaust. On the way down, I realized that they were gonna light the tent on fire and then drag it off the cliff. We did speak to the police, but they found nothing. They couldn't even find our tent or any traces that we were even there. I had my uncle weld a new exhaust, and I ended up leaving for Texas that afternoon. I haven't been back to Colorado since then, and I will most likely never go there again. Please be careful when you go camping or hiking out in the forest. Sometimes we fear the paranormal or something that might be out there, but to be honest, the real monsters are humans. I want to share this story with you all about my friend who we used to make fun of whenever we would go camping or basically anywhere outdoors. He would always say that he has to watch the fire, and we would just make fun of him. That is, until he told us why he does that. Back when his grandfather was still alive, my friend was about 16 and was going camping with his grandfather near the house. My friend was the typical fat kid who plays too many video games. He had gone camping before, but never needed to learn much about the outdoors. However, his grandfather was a badass Native American from the Passamaquoddy tribe. I'm being serious, his grandfather was awesome. He was a scrappy old man that had won many competitions for his archery skills. The man was a master with a bow. He was very passionate about his culture and very outspoken about casinos. And he was just a really old school gentleman with some great stories. On this weekend, his grandfather takes him backpacking down near the river, near their home. It's about 4 miles along the railroad tracks, and then some rocky cliffs to get there. My friend is all excited to camp in the trees, to fish in the river, that sort of thing. They reach this massive sand pit. The area is low and surrounded by a much higher and denser wooded area. It's tough to climb down into, but easy to get out of. His grandfather then says, "We're here. My friend then questions his grandfather's choice of location, but he knows that his grandfather knows best, since he is a wilderness man. They set up camp, but the whole night his grandfather seems tense. When they sit around eating dinner, my friend's grandfather is mostly quiet, watching the fire and staring off into the tree line, almost in a trance. My friend notices that his grandfather is tensely holding onto his bow, which is about an arm's length from his body, leaning against the chair he was sitting in. My friend tries a few times to engage with him, and eventually gets his grandfather's attention. His grandfather shows him some cool things that night, some stuff about wood, and also about playing guitar. My friend eventually gets tired after a few hours and goes to bed. He then gets to asking his grandfather when he's gonna go to bed, and he says that he came because he has to watch the fire. My friend decides to go to bed, hoping that his grandfather will eventually catch up. A few hours pass and my friend wakes up to rustling outside the tent. He then pokes his head out to find his grandfather still watching the fire and staring at the tree line. "Grandpa, what are you doing?" "It's past midnight." His grandfather responds, "Watching the fire. You go to bed and get yourself some rest." My friend at this point is getting weirded out, but he just goes back to sleep. The next morning, my friend gets up to find his grandfather cooking breakfast over the same fire and whistling happy. He then asks his grandfather what time did he go to bed, and his grandfather just replies, "When they stop watching my fire." My friend is creeped out by this and he asks his grandfather what he meant, but he gets no response. They spend the morning doing quote-unquote man stuff, but that afternoon his grandfather seems to be in a hurry, and he tells my friend to go get some more firewood before the night. My friend walks out of the sandpit and into the trees to grab some branches. He notices an arrow sticking out of a tree, nearly at head level. When he's finally standing up, he shouts back to his grandfather that he's a crazy old man, and comes back down with the firewood and the arrow. The grandfather thanks him and he just stores the arrow away. Again, my friend starts asking him about this, but he gets nothing of an explanation. Both of them get the fire going again. Then they eat dinner and go about their night telling stories. My friend then asks his grandfather about his heritage, which his grandfather was excited to talk about. He tells my friend the story of there being two types of creatures in the world: those who watch the fires to keep them lit, and those who watch fires to put them out. His grandfather follows up by saying that fire brings a lot of good into the world, but there are some things who don't like that and actually want to destroy it. When the fire goes out, it's a sign of a bad omen. My friend is still creeped out at this story, but after that, he says his grandfather never made reference to it again. The night of camping continues, and my friend goes to bed. His grandfather stays out to watch the fire once again, and my friend just gives up trying to get him to rest. The next morning, he wakes up, and just like in a scary movie, the fire is out. There's just ash. There's nothing. His grandfather is missing. My friend starts panicking and looks all around the campsite. He finds his grandfather's bow is gone, and it's clear that the grandfather scrambled because things that he should have taken, like his shoes, were left at the campsite. My friend figures he can go wander up to where he found the arrow of the day before and see if his grandfather was just grabbing wood, even though he's definitely in panic mode. On his way up the hill to the trees, he sees tracks in the sand, possibly his grandfather's. My friend makes it into the woods and sees a few arrows here and there, most of them on the ground and looking like they were fired from the sandpit below. One arrow is clearly stuck in a tree, where it's actually struck a little bit above the level for my friend, who's about 6 feet at the time. Attached to the head of the arrow is a patch of fur. The tree also bears a small patch of what looks like blood around the impact area. My friend then starts basically shitting his pants at this point, wondering if his grandfather was attacked by an animal. My friend then has a moment of strange clarity, which he can't really describe. He said it felt like one of those miraculous moments that you hear about in the news, when a parent suddenly can hear their baby crying, when they're in danger. He decides to go back to the camp and relight the fire to maybe signal to his grandfather. He gets the fire going, smoky and bright, and then throws on his gear to start searching the perimeter of the pit. At this point, my friend is shouting his grandfather's name. As he's walking the area near where he found the bloody tree, he hears something, almost like an injured animal. This is then followed by what he described as one of the nastiest shrieks he had ever heard in his life. He shudders a bit just telling me the story. My friend turns his head towards the direction of the sound, and he sees his grandfather sprinting through the trees, barefoot with his bow and beelining directly towards the campsite. My friend also runs towards him. His grandfather thanks him for watching the fire, and then tells him that they need to leave right now. The two start to pack up, even though his grandfather is slower at this. My friend sees some bruises and cuts on his grandfather's body, and he's asking him if he's okay. At this point in the story, my friend starts to cry, and he says that his grandfather gave him the biggest, happiest smile that he had ever seen in his life. His grandfather reassures him that everything will be fine, and the two of them hike all the way back home. After that, his grandfather was back to his normal self, even though my friend and him grew much closer until he died. His grandfather only recounted the story with my friend in small parts, never really telling my friend what he saw or shot out in the forest. To this day, he swears that he saved his grandfather's life, but he'll never know what it was that was stalking them during those days. And as we started getting old, whenever we would go camping as friends, he continued being diligent about the fire, as his grandfather was. Of course, we all made fun of him for it, until he shared this story with us. There are some things that the elders do that we might find funny or don't understand, but trust them, there's a reason behind everything. I got something that happened recently to me. I work for a larger firm in the northeastern US. My parents own a small farm, so I know firsthand how different things can be on both. For example, if your farm is big enough and has enough workers, you can actually get sick days, which is what I had to take 3 days to go. I'm getting ahead of myself though. It was how I think I got sick that is more interesting. I'm in charge of rounding up the animals in a group for milking in the mornings, and also towards the night. It was really nice outside, even for 5 in the morning, and the sun was just rising. Most of the cows sleep together out in the open, but some of them go hiding in the forest, where it's hard to take my four-wheeler, which is what I saw a group of them doing. So it was by foot and into the underbrush I went, and that's where things went wrong. So I got off right where I could see the cows, and only had to make a few turns and dips to get to them. I get to the group of 4, and I round them up. I chased them out of the woods. One of them is a big old girl who likes to bully people because she's bigger and she thinks she's better than you. So she took a swing at me a few times with her head, which actually prompted me to calling her every name in the book I could think of. And she's fucking lucky she's pregnant, or else I would have sold her myself. She completely ignores me and goes off with the rest of her little posse to the larger stream of animals that are heading down through the field. At this moment, I'm not too worried about heading out after them, and this is because I'm one of the 5 people that herds the animals. I ended up getting caught on a patch of brambles, and I was trying to get free when I hear this squeal coming further from the forest. Just thinking about it gives me chills. It sounded kind of like a deer screaming, but it was much more too loud, and it sounded a little bit different. I was standing there calling the thorn patch, waiting for it to happen again, when I hear this strange shuffling to my right. I'm not sure what it is, but it looked like a naked human. It had the arms and legs and torso, but they were all way too long, and also thin. Its arms and legs were all sticking out. It was walking towards me, and it also had these really horribly weird jerky movements.
It seemed to try to be looking at me over its shoulder, and all I could see were those yellow eyes and those awful teeth. So I said, fuck the brambles, fuck everything. I scrambled the fuck out, tearing through my flesh and clothes in the process. I hear this massive crashing, but at that point I was too terrified to look and see if it was the abomination or not. My four-wheeler was still there and running by some miracle, but it was facing the direction of the woods, which I was pretty sure that I didn't do. So I jumped on, which made me face the woods again. The thing was gone, but I didn't stop to really examine the brush line. I turned around in a tight circle and I just got the fuck out of there. When I finally got down into the main field, the tail end of the line was heading into the barn, and 3 of the other people were at the bottom chatting. They all looked up when they saw me driving up. One of them raised his arms in a what the hell happened gesture, but I didn't give him time to speak before I jumped off. I told him everything that happened and what I saw, not even stopping to think that they might believe that I was crazy. They all looked at me a little uncomfortable, not because of what I was telling them, but because of how scared I seemed to be, and how I kept looking over my shoulder to see if this thing had finally made its way to the woods or not. One of the guys called the herdsman that's in charge of the cows, and told him there was a situation in the group. Nothing terrible was said, just that I had seen something out in the woods, and they looked more dangerous to people than to the cows. I got reassigned to milking to finish my shift, so I didn't have to go back out there, and everyone considered that to be the end of it. Except, it wasn't. As I was helping for the milking, I started feeling shaky and chilly. I figured I was just coming down from an adrenaline high from everything that happened. But as the milking progressed, this was obviously not the case. Several of the milkers were saying how pale I was, and they were alarmed at the scratches on my arms and face. They said it looked like an animal had attacked me. I told them that I ended up getting caught up on some thorns before one of them took a picture of me with her phone and showed me what I looked like. It really did look like something had attacked me. I'm talking claw marks on my neck, on my arms. I even had a black eye that I had no idea that I even had. Needless to say, this freaked me out pretty badly, to the point where one of the milkers called the herdsman and told me to go to the office so I could check out and go home. Nobody really wanted me to be on my own, so one of the milkers actually walked me to the office, which was only like 50 feet away, but I was still very glad for the company. Being outside made me start looking for the thing again. The herdsman was in the office along with my boyfriend, who's actually the herdsman's nephew. The herdsman is the co-owner of the farm, so he can basically make executive decisions about the stuff that goes on, and I had decided that my boyfriend would take me home. At this point, I didn't want to be alone. The herdsman and my boyfriend were talking to each other, as I felt a fever at this point, when I started to hear this long drawn out scraping sound, almost like something big was rubbing up against the side of the office wall. I cut into the conversation asking if there was a cow possibly outside that was loose, because I thought that I could hear one outside. This got me a funny look, but my boyfriend went to one of the windows to look outside. Apparently, there was something out there, but it wasn't a cow. It looked human, and it was standing in the gravel driveway. My boyfriend then said, "Can I help you?" to the person, and had turned to go to the door so he could speak more normally. The conversation went like this: "What can I do for you?" Silence. "Is there anything we can help you with?" Silence. "If you need anything, just let us know." He and the herdsman had another conversation about who the fuck was outside and why they were acting so weird. The herdsman went to talk to the guy, and my boyfriend turned back to me to help me so I could go home. Well, he's gone now. That's when me and my boyfriend looked at each other, like how could the guy just be gone? My boyfriend decided that I would ride in a tractor with him for the next 7 hours instead of going home, which I didn't want to. His other option was that I go to the doctor, which we thought about. I really didn't want to be alone and possibly encounter this man again. I hadn't taken into consideration that the fields that my boyfriend was working in were surrounded by the woods, however. It was only around 8:30 when my boyfriend finally decided that he was done with work and was parking that I did see something way off on the other side of the field that he had been working in. I saw something standing between the trees. Definitely a person, but they just kept standing there completely motionless. It felt like they were staring straight at me, just like I was staring at them. I went home and was taken to the doctor in the middle of the night. I ended up getting a fever that was too high, and it wasn't getting any better. That was 5 days ago. I'm feeling so much better now, but I'm still sick and exhausted. I haven't even worked up the courage to look out the window this morning to check the tree line to see if this thing is still there. Every now and then, I'll see someone standing in the trees or something. Ever since I saw whatever the hell I saw back there, weird things have been happening on the farm. The office was completely trashed one morning, almost like a wild animal had gone through it. Nothing was taken, even the food was just thrown about. However, there were a few bloody smears in really hard to reach high places that looked like handprints, which is most likely what convinced the owners to call the police. Some of the workers have been complaining about seeing a stranger hanging around the farm, but nobody ever agrees on what he looks like. Some people who live close to the farm have even said that they seen a stranger following them home. One of the guys has said that he thought he saw an animal out in his front porch the other night. He said he saw its eyes reflecting in the field, which is when he opened the door and he greeted this animal with a shotgun. He's around 60 or so. He said that when he saw this animal, it looked like a weird type of dog, but it was way too big, and its eyes were all wrong for a dog. Now, the part that gets me though, is that nobody has reported seeing the thing that I saw at first. But then again, who would actually say something? Like I said, weird things have been going on around the farm. I'm not sure what's going on out here. I'm fucking terrified to where I don't even want to go outside no more. I've been reassigned into the office instead, so I'm just handling the back end of things, putting in numbers and working in the computer, which is where I'm actually typing this from. People have been saying that there's been livestock going missing, or sometimes they're just found dead out in the woods. I'm starting to think that there's something living out here. I'm not sure, but I gotta go. These numbers are due within the next 30 minutes. If anything else happens, I'll give you all an update whenever I can.
I'm gonna start off this story by explaining that it's not mine. I'm just the one who wrote it all down. I'm not Denye, the actual name of the Navajo, and this is how I'm gonna refer to them from here on out. I have never lived on a reservation, and I know very little about their folklore. I was actually in between of believing in all these paranormal things for a really long time, until something happened to me a few years ago that made me into a believer. Nothing to do with skinwalkers or things of that nature, but it definitely made me believe in ghosts. This story was told by my Denia friend Sam, and comes from his own experience. I met Sam on a photo gig a few years after graduating art school, and we connected through our shared interest in the paranormal. We would tell stories about our personal paranormal experiences. All names have been changed at Sam's request for privacy, and I'm using a different account. Sam also gave me permission to write this, and fully cooperated with me as I put this together. According to him, he's too lazy, and I have too much time on my hands, so he was fine with me putting this together for him. Sam is a full-blooded Denie. His mother and father grew up in the nation near New Mexico. They had Sam at a very young age, and broke up a few years after he was born. His mother moved back to Illinois with his now stepfather, who is white and Catholic. Sam grew up in Chicago suburb and lived the most of his childhood and teenage years there. He would visit his dad for a couple weeks a few times a year, but never really spent a huge amount of time out on the res. It was at 20 that Sam moved in with his dad on the reservation. He said to get a better understanding of his heritage, as he said it, and stayed there till he was about 24. He was very interested in his Denia heritage, especially when he started developing his art practice as a painter and photographer. As he spent more and more time on the res, he grew a deep interest in Denia superstition, I guess as a way to connect to his culture that he felt he didn't do enough to be a part of during his childhood and teenage years, since he was raised in Midwestern suburban white culture because of his mother and stepdad. While on the res, he made friends with and eventually dated a girl that we're gonna call Jess, who had fully grown up on the res. She was a little older than Sam and got her teaching degree in another state before coming back to the res to teach high school. She was basically agnostic, but had a very superstitious family. In fact, her great uncle, who we're gonna call John, was a medicine man. I'm not really familiar with the details surrounding this practice, and Sam also didn't talk too much about this, but basically, he was a very respected elder and was extremely superstitious. He often spoke of Denia folklore, creatures, magic, etc., and took it all very serious. John was pretty old and often needed help around his property, so Sam was quite often over there helping him out with odd jobs. Sam felt weird taking money from the old man, especially since Sam already had a part-time job as an art teacher and sold his paintings and photos in Santa Fe art markets. So as payment, Sam would ask John to share some of his knowledge with him. It was Sam's way of connecting to his heritage. He told me that they would talk for an hour or two every night that Sam came over to help. Sam would basically grill him on every random, Denia-related thing under the sun, and would generally get an earful about it, except when it came to one specific topic, Yinadroshi. Sam, having spent most of his childhood with his mom and stepdad off the res, didn't have the same outlook on skinwalkers that other Denia did. The whole thing about not speaking about them wasn't something he subscribed to, mainly because A, Sam grew up in the Chicago area where no skinwalkers would be around anyways, and B, he was raised Catholic and didn't believe in Denia superstitions. He was pretty interested in this part of Denia culture because of how common skinwalkers were on the internet. So naturally, his interest in them disturbed John, and he generally shut down any discussion of them. She got visibly upset and told him to never speak of them to her or her great uncle ever again. This was really weird to Sam, since Jess wasn't superstitious or even religious for that matter. He thought that his agnostic girlfriend wouldn't be so weird about these things. She explained to Sam that, despite her being agnostic, that was one thing she knew was real, because she and other members of her family had experiences. She told him a very similar story to the types you'll see posted online. Late at night on the res, driving home, and seeing what you think is a coyote or a sheep following you at a great speed, only upon closer inspection, see what appears to be human underneath animal skin, or a half man, half coyote kind of creature. This happened to Jess when she was a little girl, while being driven home by her father. Great Uncle John came and performed some sort of protection cleansing ritual that they thought would cover them, at least for a few years. It wasn't until Jess moved back after getting her degree did she encounter one again, this time running along the rooftops of some homes and buildings in town. She thought somehow someone's dog got up on their roof, but it would then get on two legs and jump to the next building. After landing, it would stay up there, sitting cross-legged, staring at her with yellow eyes. She ended up speeding home so fast that she got pulled over by the tribal police. When she explained what she saw and why she was speeding, the officer told her to be quiet, tore up the ticket he was writing, and told her to get her ass home. Uncle John came by again and performed the ritual. Jess said that according to John, the creature wasn't after her and was caught in the act of stalking someone else. That made it set its eyes upon her, so she was to be extra cautious. And this is why she stands firm by the words of, "Shut the fuck up about them forever." She only told Sam all of this to keep the things off her and her family. But wouldn't you know it, that just made him more interested. And who could blame him? It seems as though Sam kind of whittled down John's resolve on the issue, because eventually, the old man budged a little bit. He revealed to Sam a few bits and pieces of information over the years. I'm just gonna copy and paste from some Instagram messages he sent me. Please note that the only changes I made to his messages were the names of those involved. Also, in case it isn't obvious, Sam likes to abbreviate Skinwalker to SW. The first thing John told me about Skinwalkers was that they can't actually read minds like they say in the stories and stuff. It was basically what you'll call an old wives' tale because they didn't want their kids talking about that shit and spreading the idea that this was something people could do. I actually think they wanted the practice of being Skinwalkers to die out completely, so they thought by forbidding people from talking about it, nobody would be curious enough to try out black magic and shit. I think because Denia are so steeped in oral traditions that they basically believed if enough people stop talking about a thing, it dies forever. But you know real well that you can't tell people not to talk about something. So they said that if you talk about Skinwalkers, it will make them interested in you and seek you out. It was just them trying to scare kids. The other thing is that they are just regular people, not monsters. They don't have any special powers. They just know a lot about certain things that a lot of us don't. Like how there are things you know how to do as a video guy, for example, that regular people who never done it don't. Like when you show them a really cool edit you did or shots you pulled off, and they're like, how did you do that? It's the same kind of stuff. They just spend a lot of time learning about stuff that makes them able to do what they do. They studied animals and how they move, making suits, studied poisons, shit like that. They're actually medicine men just like John. In fact, a lot of them are openly good medicine men in the community, and nobody knows they practice this stuff. It's just another form of their medicine men stuff, but they use it for people who want to harm or scare others. Like they get hired to fuck with people. John told me this one story about a close friend who was also a medicine man in the city area that had an asshole in the neighborhood who kept bitching about his property lines or something like that. He was building a fence and there was a big fuss about it. The guy was harassing the shit out of his next door neighbor because of it, but the neighbor knew where his land started and ended, so he didn't budge. Eventually, some weird shit started to go down. The asshole's neighbor was talking about how there was a giant coyote in his backyard that would look in the windows at night and scare the fuck out of him and his girlfriend. He would hang in his backyard with a shotgun around sundown, which of course would weird out everyone in the neighborhood, and a lot of folks were saying that he was mentally unstable. But then people in the neighborhood started hearing fucked up noises, and someone saw a coyote stand on its hind legs and look in the windows. Then one day, the guy's girlfriend drove him back to the emergency room because he was having a really bad trip apparently, hallucinating and talking about this coyote man who was saying that he was gonna kill him. John doesn't know what he was on, if it was some kind of drug or something. He came down a few hours later and a lot of people in town laughed it off. But John's friend and a few other people in the neighborhood, like I assume the ones who actually saw the coyote man, knew that it was most likely a Skinwalker fucking with him. John said that Skinwalkers know a lot about medicine, how to get the results they want from them, and how to administer them to victims without them knowing. Like they know so much about the compounds and shit. that they know exactly how it will affect you and how to fuck with you when you're on them. So John's friend came by to bless the place and perform a ritual, and the weird shit stopped. Because Skinwalkers are medicine men themselves, they also believe in the power of the rituals that are used against them. That's how I would say these things work. Nothing super magical or paranormal about it. They just have strong beliefs and know what to fuck with and what not to. Anywho, so he thinks that this asshole neighbor got a Skinwalker on him to get him to move out of town or something like that. The last thing John told me for a really long time was about how Skinwalkers were actually good guys at one time. They created that whole practice to fuck with the colonizers. They protected other people and scared away anybody trying to take the land. But some started using the practice for their own gain, and once the treaties were signed and we got land back and all that, they just started using it to do bad stuff to other Dinya. After this, John basically closed the door on the Skinwalker talk. Sam told me he thought it was weird that John didn't want to talk about them. After all, John said it himself that Skinwalkers can't read minds, and talking about them didn't draw their attention to you. As Sam said, it's an old wives' tale. He even told this to Jess, but she shot him down. She actually kind of insulted him apparently, telling Sam that he's not a real Dinya, so he doesn't understand, and him trying to get into this deep Skinwalker stuff was actually offensive to their heritage. And that's part 1. I will be posting the second part soon, which will begin to cover some more elements of Skinwalker lore that I thought was a lot more interesting than what John initially led on. I realized that the last post presented a grounded, realistic idea of the Skinwalker. But this is where we start getting into some real supernatural shit. And because of that, I do want to say everything with a disclaimer that what I'm about to tell you, I cannot verify. I am not Dinya, and I know very few folks who are native, much less culturally native. I don't live anywhere near the Four Corners either. This is all from the recollection of one Dinya friend of mine, who is retelling stories and information given to him by a much older man. Believe what you can, or take everything with a grain of salt. I hope it's a fun read. I'm warning you, it's much longer this time around. After learning the truth about Skinwalkers and being scolded by his girlfriend, Sam took the clue and for a while focused his time spent with John on things the old man actually wanted to talk about. Sam learned a lot about his culture and the practice of medicine man, and worked on this gorgeous 4x5 portrait series of elderly folks on the REZ. Sam told me that it was around this time that he realized he was pretty cautious in the way he approached the Skinwalker subject. He was just a dumb kid raised in white America who thought he was being curious about his native culture, when actually he was spending more time chasing scary stories than actually learning about his people. By the time Sam had been living on the REZ for about 4 or so years, he even got a full-time teaching job at one of the reservation schools. He moved out of his dad's place and got his own. Sam always had planned to move back to Illinois or to some bigger city with more of an art scene, but wanted to spend much more time on the REZ, at least another 5 years or so. Despite that desire to stay and his new job, he and Jess ended up moving to my city only a few months into his full-time position. And that's around the time that I actually met him. His usual response to why they both left was that he needed to be somewhere with a bigger art scene and community, and Jess wanted to go back to school to get an MSW. But it wasn't until I got to know him well, and we started bonding over our shared interest in the paranormal, did he actually tell me why they left. Here are the DMs that he sent me. John was getting up there in age, late 80s. The guy lived a long life, had some cancer in his 60s and beat it, but he would tell me that he always wondered when it would come back to take him. I think it was like in 2014 or something. As a side note, Sam moved to the REZ in 2010, and met John a few months after that. So he was diagnosed with lung cancer that spread to his liver, colon, and he was only given a few months to a year to live. Fucking sucked to hear because we were basically brothers by this point. For being as old as he was really sharp. After being diagnosed with cancer, Jess, her father, and Sam spent a lot more time with the old man helping him around the house. At this point in his life he was only in bed, and had refused to be put in hospice care as he thought it was a waste of the family's money, for as Sam put it, a more comfortable way of dying. A few months in, Sam received a call from John asking him to come over that evening. And here's the message from Sam. He told me that he had some stuff he wanted to tell me that he didn't want to die with him. I assume he felt like he was on his way out based on that. I packed my recorder in case he was okay with me recording him. When Sam arrived, John was just sitting in his porch, watching the sunset. He beckoned Sam to sit next to him and told him that he had some last bits of knowledge to share with him. When Sam mentioned that he brought his camera with him, John allowed him to film, with his only request being that he wouldn't show it to anyone, and that he would stop recording when he told him to. This is what Sam sent me. We spent like an hour or so just talking about whatever came to his mind. It was a lot of stuff like I told you before. Stuff like parts of the reservation that are cursed, pathways or portals to other dimensions, and then stuff like how to bless your home, what plants do what, how to find your way home if you're lost in the desert. Also some songs and prayers that I had to have on tape because it was in the language, and I'm actually trash at it. It was like he was trying to cover everything he felt like he hadn't told me before, as he never actually passed on his knowledge to one before. He said he was keeping some knowledge for himself, but he still wanted to share what he felt comfortable with. It was here that I asked Sam why John would tell his great niece's boyfriend from Chicago all of this, if it's supposed to be secrets and stuff that stay within the Dania people. It's a little bit different than that. Like I did a lot for him, renovated his home, built him a patio, even helped him get internet, and gave him my old MacBook and showed him how to use it. I gave him my old Wii, and he became fucking obsessed with Wii Sports. Pretty sure he felt like he owed me because of everything I helped him with, and I always refused to take a single penny. I get why it seems weird, but also I feel like he didn't have anyone interested enough to just sit down and hear him talk for hours on end. So I guess he appreciated me for that or something. Or maybe he was actually just fucking with me, but I doubt it. He was pretty sharp in his old age, and also was a genuine guy. After the sun went down, John requested that they turn off the camera and go inside. Once inside, he told Sam to turn on the TV and raise the volume. He explained that it was important that no one hear their conversation. According to Sam, the old man didn't have any neighbors for miles, so he actually found that strange, at least until he learned what their conversation was about. I haven't been honest with you about Yinadroshi, he said. He then requested that Sam burn some plants, herbs, mixtures of some sort that he had to put on top of the logs in his fireplace. This was so that, according to John, no one in this world or the other could hear them. It seems, and this is just Sam's reading of the situation, that John thought by writing Skinwalkers off as just assholes who dress in animal skins and drug people with shrooms to fuck with them, he would discourage the young man from ever looking any further into the legends. And while that was definitely true, there were Skinwalkers who had no powers, no connection with the supernatural, and were just Dania fanatics who played dress up. That was only part of the story. Yinadroshis exist in two different natures. The first kind, John had already explained to Sam. Medicine man with no actual supernatural powers, just a very extensive knowledge of various medicine compounds, able to craft very convincing outfits of animal pelts and can move and behave very similar to whatever animal they wish to mimic. These folks were accessible to the general population on the REZ. When I say accessible, of course, I don't mean just anyone can seek them out. It takes someone well connected. These skinwalkers would often receive monetary compensation for their deeds. They based this entire practice on the legends of the shapeshifters and dark witches in Denye folklore. This explains a good portion of skinwalker stories and lore that you see posted online. Large coyotes or sheep behaving strange, only to, upon closer inspection, reveal that they are a person wearing animal skins. But what about the other stories? The stories of these creatures, half man, half beast, pulling off unnatural speeds around the REZ, running alongside cars at top speed, mimicking voices, reading and even controlling minds, immune to firearms, shape-shifting into incredibly convincing, terrifying wolf-like creatures, glowing red or yellow eyes and faces that are not human or animal. Well, you guessed it, those are real Yinadroshis, powerful, dark witches who have scared the Denye and sometimes others for centuries. John said that skinwalkers developed around the time when the first colonizers arrived. Medicine men and the tribes were incredibly cautious of these visitors, and as time went on, they revealed themselves to be conquerors. The medicine man, as Sam put it, turned to the dark side. In order to scare them off, medicine men back then knew that by turning to the practice of black magic, there wasn't really any turning back. Black magic robs them of humanity and corrupts their souls, but they believed that they could do this for the good of their people, and then, once the colonizers were driven out, be dealt with by their own people. In fact, some medicine men revealed their plans for this to other members of their practice, who opted not to participate in the rituals. They gave them detailed instructions on how to protect themselves, and even kill them when necessary. Unfortunately, we know how this turned out. And now, we have the unique Denye problem of the skinwalkers. And unlike the other skinwalkers, the pretenders in animal fur, these Yinadroshis are not human, or at least not in the sense that is recognized by the Denye. In order to become one of these things, they must participate in a ceremony that essentially robs them of their humanity, and after a long enough time living as one of them, they barely even resemble a human in appearance. Think of the Wendigo, a creature that was once human, but through some horrific, twisted process or ritual, became something else. The practice of being a skinwalker is guarded, even more so than that of the pretenders. It requires committing horrible acts, murder, or torture of a family member or friend, ingesting poisons and human flesh, and communicating with entities from other dimensions. Skinwalkers are also a people unto themselves, an isolated subculture of the Denye that branched off a long time ago. Even though they make their home in the same region as the Denye, they generally do not live among them. They are a completely separate community. John did not go into great detail on the process of becoming a skinwalker. He said no man who calls himself Denye would ever know such things. That might have been true a century ago, when skinwalkers still lived among the people, but in this day and age, the skinwalker is much too concerned with being found out, and so they isolate themselves and brought all knowledge with them. Think of those tribes that are still being discovered in the jungles of Africa and South America, completely cut off from the rest of the world. Only this tribe is aware of the rest of the people and actually chooses to isolate. That all being said, of course, they still do go out among the people. It's just always at night, among only a small group of folks, and only for their own dark purposes. Exactly what Skinwalkers gain from their behavior towards the Denye is disrupted among medicine men. John's understanding was that, aside from stealing livestock, their abilities feed off the fear that they instill in others, and to their connection to whatever dark entities. But somebody dying directly at the hands of a Skinwalker is extremely rare. John then went on to say how a lot of things that are sometimes attributed to deaths of despair, such as suicide, overdose, alcohol poisoning, etc., could be traced to very powerful Skinwalkers. It's said that a basic trait of the Skinwalker is being able to instill fear in their victims, like a weak form of mind control. More powerful Skinwalkers can actually cause folks to harm themselves. However, John wasn't sure if the mind control rumors were true. The powder of a corpse, the fabled favorite weapon of the Skinwalker, blown on their victims' faces, could actually be how they make these things happen. While some say that the powder of a corpse is a powerful poison that slowly kills over the course of a few days, leaving no trace of itself in one's system. I heard of things like this before. Criminals in some parts of South America use something similar to make their marks essentially empty their bank accounts for them. John believes in both of these explanations. It is sometimes a cocktail of poison and human bone, and sometimes it's a drug, and the Skinwalker uses this to instruct the victim to harm or kill themselves somehow. Having contact directly with their victims is too risky, both for the individual Skinwalker as well as their clan, and is likely frowned upon. When a Skinwalker does physically kill someone, the person either disappears or has their body found much later with their death ruled as an animal attack. John says that this is more common among weaker Skinwalkers. One detail that stood out to Sam was the idea that Skinwalkers communicate with other entities from other dimensions, and he pressed John on this a bit more. In Sam's words, he knew I was raised Catholic, so he explained them to me as basically being demons. I don't remember what it was, but even if I did, I most likely couldn't spell it. They are evil, inhuman spirits that try and come into our realm, or dimension, or plane, or whatever, but don't exactly have a physical presence, so they possess people. Or in the case of Skinwalkers, they use them as their connection to this world, so some Skinwalkers do the bidding of demons, and in return, the demons give them powers. But John also said that some really old Skinwalkers aren't even people anymore. They're only living as empty vessels, but demons live inside them. I guess the idea is that demons give them powers in exchange for letting the demon possess their body by using it as their flesh puppet after they die. According to John, they communicate with these beings through their knowledge of the portal system in the America's Southwest. This included places that are off the reservation, even though Skinwalkers are careful about going off the REZ, as it can be more densely populated, and carries with it a risk of being discovered. The few times they do, they are good at keeping a low profile, being actual shapeshifters and all. But because of their nature, they can't resist feeding off the fear of others. So small groups of campers and people driving alone at night off the REZ have stories as well. Sometimes lone visitors outside the reservation, but that are close to a portal, who are off camping, hiking, will straight up disappear under weird circumstances. This may be a stretch, but this reminded me of David's missing 411 research. I highly doubt Skinwalkers are to blame for the majority of these mysterious disappearances, but what if John is saying is true? A few of them could have possibly fallen prey to one. These portals often exist in caves and small canyons, and require a full ritual, offerings, dances, and a sacrifice to open. What the sacrifice is, John isn't sure, but he guesses that disappearing hikers may have something to do with it. When the portals open, they are used for different things, communicating with spirits and demons, gaining more power, summoning other entities into our world, or even throwing themselves or others into the portals and leaving this world. Sam asked why they would go into the portals and what existed beyond them. It was another dimension that allowed them to observe our world, but not interact with it, as well as see things and beings that we cannot see or interact with in our own plane. He said that they would interact in that dimension with these things called Chendis, which are the evil spirits of those deceased, said to be a manifestation of everything that was bad about a person. They would send Chendis out to not only harm others and spread illness, but also report on which people were growing wise to the Skinwalkers. This was where the belief that Skinwalkers are not to be discussed come from. Chendis can listen to your conversations and report back to the Skinwalkers who commune with them, and then using portals, show them where the offending individual lived. It was very important to the Skinwalkers that much of the general population know nothing about them, their culture, their practices, and most importantly, who they are. Nowadays, of course, because Skinwalkers isolate, protecting their identities was not as crucial, as anyone who saw their original forms would never be able to recognize them, as they were not members of the community. But John noted that there were select Skinwalkers who would live alongside the communities, and sometimes in them, as a way of feeding off others' energy without directly stalking or scaring them. He told me a little story about this group of folks who lived near a weird old witch. This was back in the 1980s, I think. She would come into town but never buy anything from the stores or the markets or anything like that. Just walk around, stare at people. One day, a guy and his wife went into one of the cities off the REZ for the weekend, and while they were at a restaurant, they saw her looking through the window at them. I actually painted this scene a while back, so they were wondering how the fuck she got out there, and it scared the shit out of them. Like she just lived in a Hogan, and she didn't even have a car. She ended up disappearing, and that night, the wife had a dream that the old lady had gone down on all fours and turned into a fucked up looking coyote. On their way back to the REZ the next evening, they saw what they thought was an injured coyote on the side of the road. The husband was gonna get out to see what was up, but the wife made him stop. The coyote was looking straight at her, with the same stare that she saw in the old woman's eyes. It leapt up on its hind legs and ran off. The next day, the wife told everyone she could that the old lady was a Skinwalker. Rumor has it that the old witch got sick and died the next day. Do take notice of the words, rumor has it. Many people believe that if you learn and tell others of a Skinwalker's identity, it can spell disaster for them, and is one of the few ways an average person can kill them. However, this is only partially true. It weakens the Skinwalker by not only robbing them of their prey, but it doesn't kill them. But what does actually kill them? Other Skinwalkers. According to John, the woman did not die of a random sudden illness. She simply left town. He believes to go back to her local Skinwalker community. However, the next day she was found, not far from her own Hogan, dead and mauled by a pack of animals. Wolf bites, bear claw marks, and even evidence of being trampled by a horse were found on her body. When the authorities found the body, a local medicine man, whom John actually knew, instructed the police to say that she died of an illness. He wanted people to remain unaware that a community of skinwalkers was in their midst, so no curious, stupid folks would go looking for them. And that's part 2. I'll post part 3 tomorrow. Third part will go into detail on why Sam left the reservation. So again, full disclaimer, I cannot verify any of these stories. Believe what you can, or take it all with a grain of salt. So if skinwalkers are, say, for a select few, an isolated group, how do they add more to their ranks? They used to be easier to join, like if you were a medicine man and knew how to find them, and had completed the first ritual on your own. They will let you go through the rituals and train you. You have to complete the first ritual before even looking for the skinwalkers. That way they know that you reached the point of no return. John said that he didn't know the actual rituals, but he assumed it was the part where you kill a close friend or family member, so you couldn't really go back to your regular way of living, and so you robbed yourself of your humanity too. It's how they know that you're real, otherwise they just kill you on the spot. John told Sam he had no idea how skinwalkers were recruited. The most likely scenario would most likely be kidnapping someone very young and grooming them to murder the family they were taken from, or choosing to share their knowledge with people that the demons have scouted out as a spirit and potential addition to their ranks. It should be noted that according to John, pretenders almost never became real skinwalkers. No info on why. Sam and I guess that they most likely want the pretenders to do their thing and continue to exist, to throw folks off their trail. Finally, John had one last piece of information to share. Yes, these skinwalkers actually did transform into animals, and it was often to varying degrees of success. The more skilled skinwalkers could mimic an animal perfectly, to the point where you wouldn't be able to pick them out among a pack. But the issue is, a normal old coyote or sheep isn't scary if it looks and behaves exactly as it should. So skinwalkers on purpose transform into imperfect or unnatural creatures. Things such as larger size, weird proportions, even human features mixed in. One story that stood out to me in regards to the way skinwalkers present, mainly because it had to do with the infamous Skinwalker Ranch. My personal least favorite skinwalker story because it sounds so ridiculous and is barely even about actual skinwalkers. Okay, so first of all, let me say I think Skinwalker Ranch is mostly bullshit. John's heard the stories and says it's white people crap. People say its land is cursed by Denye because it was stolen from us, and they think we got a skinwalker on it. But we know that's not possible because they exist separate to the Denye, and we can't summon them. But there was a skinwalker on the land. Several, most likely. A tribe of skinwalkers that just refused to leave. So people said it was a Denye curse. But most of the crazy UFO shit just doesn't track with me or John. Maybe some of it because Denye have seen shit, but I don't know. A lot of it sounds bunk. But anyways, the reason I bring up Skinwalker Ranch is because one of the stories from the white people who lived there was that they saw this big ass wolf, like bigger than any wolf in existence, the size of a horse maybe. This was actually true, I'm sure of it at least. They most likely added the UFO stuff for fun, because just saying you saw a big wolf isn't a crazy enough story. But this wolf is an example of how they'll become a real animal. But they'll add some detail that doesn't add up, or doesn't look right, and actually makes it 10 times scarier. And sometimes the transformations aren't perfect anyways, and they keep it that way instead of trying to perfect it. There was this other story I heard online, most likely about a guy who saw a giant Doberman looking thing with yellow eyes, but looked like it had bits of flesh hanging off. almost like a zombie dog. I don't know how true the story is, but it does point out this characteristic. What happens when a skinwalker absorbs the skin of the animal they kill, but it's not a perfect animal, or the skin has started to decompose before they absorb it, but it looks scary as fuck so they don't mind. I bet some of them even wait for the flesh to rot before it's absorbed. What Sam is talking about here is how they transform. Basically, they can only transform into animals they kill themselves. They must skin the animal and cover themselves in the pelt, often while it is still warm and bloody. After a certain period of time, the animal skin will be absorbed by the skinwalker, and not only will they gain the ability to transform into the animal at will, but some of the features of the beast will begin to show in the skinwalker's human form. This is how many older skinwalkers, as they age, begin to gradually lose human features, only to be replaced with more animal ones. Their human skin ages, even decays, while their animal skin does not, remaining in the same state it was when they absorbed it. This is where the stench of decay that many associate with skinwalkers comes from. It's the human being, rotting. John began noticing that the fire was dying down, and it was getting late. He told Sam that he is not to speak a word of what he was told while on the reservation. The only way in which their speech was protected from the prying demons was the mixture in the fireplace, and the blessings that John had performed earlier in the day. The loud TV was there just in case anyone, human or skinwalker, was in the area and walked by to listen. He gave Sam a small wooden box filled with the same mixture he threw on the fire, as well as a few other various things that John said would protect him. He told Sam not to take his possessions of these things as some sort of free ticket to talk freely about skinwalkers. However, he said something about how he had many decades of experience in these matters and felt safe. Plus, he was gonna die soon, so if a skinwalker took him out of his misery, so be it. Sam didn't have that luck, so he needed to walk on the side of caution. Off the REZ, he was free to blab all he wanted about the shapeshifters, because as Sam said, who the fuck would believe me anyways? The next day, as Sam was getting ready to pack up and leave school, he received a call from John. "Shouldn't have told you that stuff," he said, and then told him not to come by the property for a few days. He assured Sam that he had everything taken care of and was safe, but wanted to be sure. He hung up before Sam could even get a word in. He let Jess know what her great uncle had said over the phone, and naturally, Jess had to know what it was John told him about. Sam, hesitating, told her point blank that John had given him more info on the skinwalkers. He did not go into any level of detail on what it was John said, out of respect for the old man's wishes. Jess, according to Sam, went pale. It's so weird seeing your partner, who you know is a big skeptic, get scared by something like this. But I guess it just goes back to being raised in ya, hearing these stories and stuff. Also, just because you're agnostic doesn't mean you just don't have some belief in the paranormal. She told me that John most likely attracted someone's attention by talking about that shit, but that we have to trust that he knows what he's doing. And then she told me I can't speak a single word of what I heard, and I am never to ask or even allow John to tell me anything anymore. She said something like words have power. You're not culturally in yet, so you wouldn't get it. She laid into me a bit after that. I was kinda insulted, but in retrospect, she was right. It hurts to hear, but I think we all gotta take a step back. But Jess, alarmed as she was, put her trust in John and told Sam that they weren't to contact or visit his property until he said everything was okay. But that day never came. 2 nights later, Sam and Jess were awoken by a phone call from Jess's father. John was in the hospital. His body was taking a turn for the worse. The two rushed to the hospital, but John had passed away of a heart attack before they got there. For a while after John's passing, Sam, Jess, and their families lived in a pretty uneventful life. Sam thinks it was a period of about 3 or 4 months of relative calm. Jess had started looking into getting an MSW out of state, and Sam was grappling with a decision of whether or not he wanted to stay on the res or follow Jess wherever she would go. I asked Sam if there was any tension between him and Jess because of everything that happened, but he said they both sort of dropped the entire argument about Sam messing with Skinwalker knowledge. He does not think that Jess attributes what happened to John as a result of bringing Skinwalker attention onto him. After these 3 to 4 months of calm were up, strange things began happening to Jess's family members. Her father, mother, and younger brother all complained of a group of coyotes that ran around their property, keeping them up several nights a week with their noises and scratching on the side of the house. Her father had taken to standing on the porch with a shotgun some nights, but he never saw anything. Her cousin complained about missing livestock. They would completely disappear, but every once in a while, the corpse of a cow would be found a few yards from the property. Sometimes it was a cow that was missing days earlier and looked only freshly slaughtered. Then one night, Sam was staying over at Jess's house. While they were having dinner, Sam noticed it had gotten quiet outside. He told me it was windy outside, when all of a sudden, the wind could not be heard, and that's when he actually heard something tapping on the window. Jess pointed at the window behind Sam. When he turned around to look, he caught a glimpse of a figure for only a split second before it vanished. But he could hear it walking away from the window as the thing was very close to the house. The two were frozen in fear for a few seconds before the sound of the wind returned. They drew the blinds. Sam said they barely slept that night. Jess told him that she saw a large wolf with glowing yellow eyes looking into their window. She said it was a weird looking wolf and that it was smiling, almost like how a man smiles. There was a row of yellow teeth that looked strange like human teeth. Jess found herself in the coming days bothered by this. She told Sam it reminded her all too well of the two beings she saw all those years ago. They had someone come by the property to bless it, and that was that for everything that transpired at Jess's home. A few weeks after the incident, Sam was awoken by a series of noises. The noises, he said, started far away, but were loud enough to wake him up. He said they grew in volume as they grew closer. He estimated that there were about a minute or so in between. Each noise was getting closer. From far away, they sounded like your typical wolf or dog, but as they got closer, they sounded more bizarre. As he said it, it's really hard to say exactly why these noises were so scary. Like, I was shivering in fear. Wave after wave and after wave of chills, dude. My eyes were watering. I felt like I was having a panic episode. They didn't sound like any animals I knew. It started like a wolf howl, but then made weird gurgling noises that went on for a few more seconds after. The noises were really loud at the front end, violent, like they were a warning. Suddenly, Sam heard a noise from inside his own home. He tells me he grabbed his pistol from his closet and burst through his bedroom door, only to see an empty house with the front and back doors wide open, swaying in the wind. Looking out the back door, he said he saw two wolves running away in the moonlight, but their gait was off, as though they had the wrong set of hind legs. The next day, Sam dialed the medicine man who blessed Jess's place. He was an old friend of John's. When he came by, he first listened to Sam's story. and then inspected the home. The medicine man, in a sort of roundabout way, told him it was indeed a Yinadroshi, and that he had caught the attention of something very old, very powerful, and very evil. In fact, the medicine man had never heard of any being of the sort to actually enter another person's dwelling place. That fact alone terrified the man, enough to where he said, "I don't know what my blessing will do. Best case scenario, it'll keep it off your property. It won't keep it off you. Worst case scenario, it'll make it mad." I thought, shit, well, it was worth it just to try for the possibility of it working, I guess. How fucked up is all this? Sam also showed the man the box of items that John had given him to see if they held any significance. The man frowned, saying he didn't wish to speak ill of the dead, but John had made a small error in giving Sam what he thought were things that would protect him. The man went to his truck and came back with another item. Sam won't tell me what the items were. This is out of respect for the Dinya traditions. He also says that he didn't even know what half of the stuff was. So the medicine man told Sam to put that with the other things, but that it was no guarantee. He said there was no one-size-fits-all solution to warding off dark witches. Witches, which by the way, is how he refers to skinwalkers. So witches are superstitious, but some more than others. Some of them have learned that certain practices don't do anything, so they just laugh those off, while some others find it actually disrespectful. Finally, he performed a blessing. He told Sam that if things don't improve, he may need to get help from someone else, or multiple others. And then he gave him the info of some other medicine man whom he trusted. He closed out by saying that John was most likely the best person. He knew how to deal with these things, in spite of the slip-up with the items he gave Sam. That night, Sam said he was sleeping peacefully, which continued for about a week. Then one night, Sam woke up to use the bathroom. He didn't switch on any lights, but noticed two very strange things. For one, it was freezing. We live in the desert, but it's never been that cold at night, that time of year. And I didn't have the AC on because I'm not a diva like you. And also, it fucking reeked. His house smelled of rotting flesh. After using the bathroom, he went back to bed and then had an incredibly vivid dream. 6 tall, lanky, skinned men in animal pelts, wearing skulls with bits of flesh still clinging to them. He remembers them clear as day. 2 appear to be dressed as wolves, one as a sheep, one as a coyote, and another as a deer, with broken antlers. They were standing around all glaring at him, with striking yellow eyes. They barely moved. In the words of Sam, they looked like people who hadn't eaten in weeks, almost zero body fat or muscle, and one of them did not look well. The deer man, I'm talking about gray skin, infections, almost like a zombie. It was disgusting. Sam woke up in a cold sweat. He told me that in the dream, he was just standing there as their eyes bore into him. He actually knew he was dreaming while it was happening. His first and so far only instance of lucid dreaming. He told me of how desperate he wanted to wake up, but he couldn't. When he left his room, he saw 5 sets of footprints in dirt. There were no footprints leading to where they actually were, just 5 sets of footprints, as though something had just appeared and disappeared in one spot out of thin air. There were also 6 men in his dream, but he never found the other set of footprints, assuming that these prints belonged to the man in his dream. When he told the medicine man about this, he was rightfully baffled and terrified. He told Sam to call the others, but that he doubted the effectiveness of their practices in light of the information that he shared. He still offered a blessing, which Sam accepted. Sam did indeed make a few calls and told several other medicine men about what happened. They told him that something very dark had set its eyes on him and that he was to be very cautious. He basically lived with Jess until the semester ended, only going home to grab something every once in a while. Sam moved back to the Chicago area for a brief period before Jess started her first semester for her master's in another city, where he joined her. That's around the time we met on a gig while he was working as a freelance photographer. Whether he left or not because of the encounters and the dream, he's never really actually said. I know he was looking to live in a city with an arts community, but I do think the encounters were the straw that broke the camel's back. Sam says that he doesn't know if he wants to return to the REZ, but he still goes every now and then to see his dad. I'm sure the Skinwalkers miss him greatly.